think Rishi Sunak has dropped this fine?
It's a difficult one because actually, on the surface, many people agree with this £10 fine proposition. I know it's something that's certainly a great frustration when people do miss those appointments. However, I think the reason he's probably dropped it is the administration it would take, the extra pressure it would put on the NHS at an already very difficult time. And I think that's probably the reason he's chosen to drop it at this stage. I think also it's important to consider that he is focusing on those manifesto pledges from 2019 as his real mandate. So since it wasn't included in that manifesto, maybe that's the reason, and it will be part of a future manifesto when he stands in the next election.
So, I mean, I guess part of the concern is at a time when we know money is extremely tight, it could have generated or at least saved the NHS a lot of money.
I think it's a really interesting policy. It's always something actually that I've supported for a considerable amount of time. But I think there are arguments about the time it does take and the administration for GPs, which also costs money. So I think it's a difficult balancing act. So I think what Rishi and the government would want to put in place is to make sure that when it is implemented, all the kind of wheels are in motion and it can be put in place in a cost-effective way.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about the balancing act. I mean, I think even people who don't support Rishi Sunak particularly must at least feel some sympathy for him because he's got the in-tray from hell, hasn't he? And I suppose he's got to figure out what the priorities are with very little money coming in.
He's got a really difficult, a very big in-tray and a really difficult balancing act. I mean, energy continues to be a huge challenge, although the cap and the implementation, the things put in place there are really going to help. Defence remains a huge challenge. Then we've also got pressures around keeping the triple lock and also investing in all important priorities such as education as well.
As you say, it's not a job any of us would want. How do you think he handled, because when he was at this hospital in Croydon yesterday, he was also confronted by an elderly patient who gave him quite a considerable ticking off over nurses' pay. How do you think he handled himself?
I saw that clip and I thought he handled himself quite well. I mean, it's very difficult. I mean, in terms of nurses' pay, and I come from a family of nurses, actually, but it's one of the real difficult decisions that are going to have to be looked at. And actually, the Conservative government under Rishi have reintroduced the bursary, which I think helps many people. We've seen many more nurses training and getting into position, which is really vital when the NHS is under such pressure. But it's one of the many difficult decisions which needs to be looked at. And I think Rishi always comes across very well, and I think he handled himself excellently.
Yeah, it's a very difficult one when you're hijacked, as it were, by a patient, somebody like that, who's got she had a very feisty way of putting it. And, of course, nurses, possibly nearly everybody agrees, it would be nice to be able to pay nurses more. But he's already hinted, hasn't he, that he's expecting cuts from virtually every government department, and that will include the NHS and defence.
Yeah, I think in terms of defence, obviously, we haven't seen the actual any announcements yet. But I think what was suggested is that there will still be an increase in the long term, but potentially looking at ways of kind of staggering that. But what I welcome in terms of Rishi's approach is he's looking across the board, and he will be really focusing on those kind of the key priorities for the countries at the moment. But the real challenge is balancing the books and making sure we have the money in our economy to invest in public services.